In the dark corners of the world, where fear meets power, a hidden network was born. One that controlled not just streets, but banks. This was the world of the Mafia. Not just criminals, but secret bankers of the underworld. Long before the digital age, they discovered something extraordinary. Money could be more powerful than bullets. From the dusty roads of Sicily to the shining skyscrapers of New York, the Mafia built a network so vast that even the real banks couldn't compete. With their shadow empire, they learned one golden rule of power. If you can control the money, you can control everything. It all began with the Prohibition era, when alcohol was banned. An opportunity was born. Smuggling liquor, running secret bars, and bribing officials became their first lessons in business. But as their profits grew, so did their ambitions. They realized that the true wealth wasn't in crime itself, but in cleaning that crime. So they built something new, an invisible empire of cash flow. They called it money laundering. Every dollar earned from illegal work was washed clean through hotels, casinos, and construction companies. Soon, their dirty money looked just as pure as any honest business. By the time governments even realized what was happening, it was too late. The Mafia had already turned themselves into financial giants. They bought politicians, judges, and even policemen, not with fear, but with wealth. And the world began to change quietly. Crime no longer wore a mask or carried a gun. It wore a suit and carried a briefcase. Every bar, every dock, every gambling table was now part of an invisible economy run by men who never showed their faces. They created offshore companies, shell corporations, and fake contracts, spreading their money across the world like spiderwebs. No matter where the cash came from, drugs, weapons, or extortion, it always ended up in the same place, their hidden vaults and secret accounts. By the 1950s, the Mafia had learned to move billions without ever touching a dollar themselves. And their greatest weapon wasn't violence anymore, it was silence. They ruled the economy from the shadows, while governments looked the other way, unaware that their own systems were being used by the very criminals they feared. The dons of the underworld had become the new bankers of the world. They knew that empires built on violence would fall, but empires built on money would last forever. And so began the quiet revolution of power, the rise of men who didn't need to fight for control, because they already owned it. This was no longer about territory, it was about currency. And as their gold flowed through every nation, one truth became clear. The world was no longer run by politicians or kings. It was run by the secret bankers of the underworld. By the 1950s, the Mafia's control had quietly moved from the back alleys to the boardrooms. They were no longer gangsters on the streets. They were silent investors, partners in the biggest banks and businesses of the modern world. Their money flowed like an unseen river, moving through layers of fake companies, offshore accounts, and investment firms. Each layer made the money cleaner, and their power stronger. They used islands like the Bahamas, Panama, and Switzerland as secret vaults, places where no one asked questions and no one kept records. In those hidden accounts, billions of dollars slept peacefully, safe from law and taxes. But this wasn't just about hiding wealth, it was about buying influence. Politicians, businessmen, and bankers, they all had a price, and the Mafia knew exactly how to pay it. A handshake with a banker could be more powerful than 1,000 gunmen, because when a banker helped them move money, he also helped them move power. Soon, their cash was in the same vaults where the governments kept their gold. The same banks that handled honest citizens' savings were now washing the blood of the underworld. But the genius of their empire was this: no one could trace the origin. The money passed through so many hands, so many companies, that it became impossible to tell what was real and what was criminal. They called it financial fog, a system so complex that even investigators would get lost inside it. While the world focused on wars and politics, the real war, the economic war, was being won silently by men no one could see. They began investing in hotels, construction projects, even international trade. Everything looked clean on the surface, but deep beneath, it was a web of black money wrapped in golden paper. And every dollar that entered the real economy gave them more control over banks, over businesses, and eventually, over nations. Governments began to rely on the same banks that were secretly owned by organized crime. It was like borrowing power from the very people they once tried to destroy. By the 1960s, their reach had become global. From Italy to America, from Cuba to Hong Kong, money moved faster than law could follow. The dons of the underworld had found a way to rule without violence. They didn't need armies anymore. They had accountants. Every transaction was a victory. Every balance sheet was a battlefield. And the Mafia, the secret bankers of the world, were winning quietly, because the new age of power was no longer built with weapons. It was built with wealth. And those who controlled the flow of wealth controlled the fate of nations.
By the 1960s and 72nd, the Mafia's money was no longer just in casinos or nightclubs. It was now in oil companies, real estate empires, and even the global arms trade. They had become silent partners in everything that made the world move. From construction contracts in America to diamond routes in Africa, every deal had a shadow investor from the underworld. The Dons realized something no government had ever dared to understand. War itself could be profitable. Where there was conflict, there was spending. And wherever money moved fast, they followed it. During the Cold War, while nations fought for ideology, the Mafia fought for currency. They funded arms, smuggled goods, and used both sides to multiply their profits. A few men sitting in dark rooms made fortunes from every bullet fired and every border crossed. To them, war wasn't tragedy, it was business. They had turned chaos into commerce. And while politicians appeared on television promising peace, these secret bankers smiled quietly, because peace was bad for business. They began to own shipping companies that transported weapons, construction firms that rebuilt cities, and oil suppliers that fueled both sides of a conflict. They didn't choose sides. They chose profit. Even intelligence agencies began to depend on them for funding secret missions that could not appear in government budgets. Cash from the underworld financed wars that history books would never fully explain. The Mafia had become the invisible spine of the world economy. Everywhere there was instability, there was opportunity, and they were always there first. Their network stretched across continents, from Hong Kong's trading ports to Switzerland's silent banks, from Miami's luxury towers to the deserts of the Middle East. Their influence was not in headlines, but in transactions. By now, they controlled more liquid money than most countries. They could make economies rise or fall simply by moving funds overnight. A phone call from one of their secret financiers could change the stock market of an entire nation. They were the unseen force beneath the surface, the shadow heartbeat of global trade. And the irony was, the world needed them. Governments borrowed from their banks. Corporations partnered with their shell companies. Even law enforcement unknowingly relied on the same financial systems the Mafia had designed. Power had never been this silent before. No bullets, no blood, just money moving faster than morality. They had mastered the art of invisibility. While the world blamed violence for corruption, they corrupted the world with wealth itself. And as their influence grew deeper, one chilling truth became clear. The line between the legal and the criminal had completely disappeared. By the end of the 1970s, the Mafia was no longer beneath society. They were inside it, living within the system they once fought against, and quietly ruling it from the shadows.
By the early 2000s, the world had entered a new era, the digital age, and the Mafia adapted faster than anyone else. They realized the future of power was no longer in guns, gold, or even government. It was in data, the new currency of control. As the internet expanded, so did their reach. They moved their empire from dark alleys to digital networks, where money could flow without borders, without names, without limits. The same minds that once smuggled cash across oceans were now moving millions with a single click. Cryptocurrency became their new weapon, silent, global, and unstoppable. No one could trace it. No banks could freeze it. No law could fully understand it. They started investing early. Bitcoin mines, blockchain startups, online casinos, digital art trades, all became their new financial playgrounds. They no longer needed to hide money. The system itself was now their camouflage. Behind every digital transaction, there was a silent whisper of their control. They built fake tech companies, created shell startups, and used AI-driven bots to move their funds across continents within seconds. Their digital network became so vast that even financial regulators began unknowingly approving Mafia-funded projects. They had merged crime with technology, and no one could tell the difference anymore. Every click, every purchase, every online ad, someone, somewhere, was feeding the Mafia's invisible machine. But this time, it wasn't just about money. It was about information. They learned how to manipulate social media, spreading trends, chaos, and even political influence, all while earning billions in ad money and crypto trades. They became the silent architects of the digital economy. Their businesses looked legitimate: tech hubs, influencer brands, and online platforms. But the core was still rotten with underworld cash. Even the metaverse didn't escape their reach. They bought digital land, NFT art, and gaming assets, turning the virtual world into another laundering ground. The more digital the world became, the more invisible their empire grew. Governments tried to catch up, but how do you arrest someone who exists only as code on a blockchain? The Mafia had transcended the physical world. They had turned from gangsters to ghosts, invisible, untouchable, and everywhere. Their story was no longer written in newspapers. It was encrypted in algorithms. And yet, one truth remained. No matter how the world evolved, greed always found a way to adapt. They didn't just build a global money empire. They built the blueprint for the future of corruption. A future where the next Mafia boss might never carry a gun, only a laptop, and the next battlefield won't be fought with bullets, but with bytes. If you want part 2, write part 2.